The sun soaked into my skin as I brushed my palms along the rosemary hedges, the earthy scent rising like a forgotten memory. I was in the backyard of the home I'd lived in for 30 years, though lately it felt more like a house I was borrowing. Since Frank died, silence had become the permanent tenant. I adjusted the brim of my straw hat and glanced over my shoulder. Ezra and Cormac were arguing near the old fire pit. I watched them with a quiet fondness. My boys, so different yet carved from the same stubborn stone. Cormac, the older one at 27, was precise, methodical, and nearly unflappable. Ezra, 23 and fresh out of grad school, wore his heart too openly, laughed too loudly, and loved too recklessly. Their bond reminded me of a rope fraying at the edges but still holding fast under tension. Cormac turned, caught me watching, and offered a faint smirk. "Mom, Ezra wants to roast corn like he's never used a grill before." Ezra threw a stray piece of bark at his brother. "I'm experimenting. It's called culinary innovation, thank you." Their voices filled the backyard, chased away the quiet I had grown used to. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked toward the picnic table, admiring the setup, simple but heartfelt. This was our first weekend together in months. Ever since Frank passed away the previous fall, the boys had taken turns checking in. But this weekend was different. Cormac had flown in from Denver. Ezra had driven down from Portland. And I, Maeve Colton, had promised to stop pretending that I was fine. "Hey," Ezra said, his tone shifting as he followed me back to the table. "You okay?" I nodded, brushing invisible crumbs from the tablecloth. "Just grateful." Cormac walked over with a tray of grilled peaches and cheese. "We've been talking," he said, setting it down with care. I raised an eyebrow, bracing myself. Ezra grinned. "We're kidnapping you." I blinked. "Excuse me." Cormac leaned forward. "Not literally. A trip. We're taking you to the San Juan Islands next weekend. 3 days. No excuses." I opened my mouth to protest, money, work, responsibilities, but Ezra held up a hand. "It's all booked. Flights, hotel, even the whale-watching tour." "The what?" Cormac smiled. "You always said you wanted to see orcas." My throat tightened. I had said that. Once. Casually. And they had remembered. "Say yes, Mom," Ezra whispered, his voice softer than I expected. I looked between them, my serious son and my wild one, both watching me with hope and something deeper. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Needed. I nodded. "All right." "Yes," Ezra hooped. Cormac allowed a rare, genuine grin. And for the first time in what felt like years, I felt the weight inside me shift. The next weekend couldn't come soon enough. The ferry rocked gently beneath our feet, the scent of salt water thick in the breeze. I leaned against the railing, fingers curled around the cool metal as the wind swept through my hair. The mainland faded behind us like a discarded memory, and ahead the lush silhouette of the San Juan Islands drew nearer. Cormac stood beside me, arms crossed, watching the waves with his usual quiet thoughtfulness. Ezra had already disappeared below deck, promising to return with coffees, and maybe a croissant if the kiosk lady likes me. The air was crisp but kind, and I closed my eyes, letting the motion lull me into something like peace. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Cormac said after a long silence. I smiled without turning. "Neither was I." He shifted, his shoulder brushing against mine. "You needed this." I nodded. "I think I did." Ezra returned with 3 mismatched paper cups and a napkin-wrapped pastry squashed slightly from the journey. He handed them out with the pride of a man delivering treasure. They didn't have croissants, but they had something called a maple twist. I didn't ask questions. He took a dramatic bite, sat on the bench at our feet, and looked up at us like a kid waiting for a story. Cormac and I exchanged glances and laughed. In that moment, the years peeled away. We were just a family again, not the remnants of grief trying to remember how to breathe. The hotel overlooked a sheltered cove where sailboats bobbed like paper toys in the tide. Our rooms shared a balcony, strung with fairy lights that flickered to life as dusk fell. Ezra dropped his duffel onto the floor and flopped onto the armchair, legs dangling over one side. "This is nice. Like suspiciously nice. Did you two rob a bank and forget to tell me?" Cormac ignored him, unpacking with the precision of someone used to hotel living. His shirts were already hung neatly in the closet while Ezra had somehow tangled his hoodie with a lamp. "I think I'll go for a walk," I said, grabbing my jacket. "Wait," Ezra sat up. "Can I come?" I hesitated. Of course. Coastal path was lined with wildflowers and ancient trees that bent slightly, as if bowing to the sea. Ezra walked beside me, his usual energy dampened by something unspoken. "Mom," he began, then stopped. He kicked a rock down the path. "You know you can talk to us, right?" I looked at him, at the sharp angle of his jaw, the eyes that still looked like they did when he was 5 and afraid of thunderstorms. "I do talk to you. You give updates. Weather reports. Headlines. Not the real stuff." The breeze carried the faint cry of gulls overhead. I sighed. "I don't know how to talk about it," I said softly. "It's like if I say the words, it makes them more real. And I'm so tired of things being real." Ezra nodded, lips pressed together. "I get that." We reached a bench overlooking the cliffs, the ocean roaring below. I sat. He didn't. "You know," he said, staring out at the horizon, "I used to be scared of leaving you alone. After Dad. I thought, what if you stopped being you?" I blinked, startled. "I didn't know that," I said. "Yeah, well, I didn't either. Until I saw you again last month and it felt like someone pressed pause on you. Like the color got drained out. I wanted to deny it. But I couldn't. I think I pressed pause on myself," I whispered. "And then I couldn't remember how to hit play." Ezra sat beside me finally, his hand brushing mine. "You don't have to do it alone." The silence between us was full, but not empty. Later, back at the hotel, Cormac opened a bottle of wine he had brought from Denver. "It's Oregon Pinot, not Merlot," he said, pouring carefully into the glasses. "But I figured that was more your speed now." I raised a brow. "Now? Used to only drink reds that were basically syrup. This has nuance." I sniffed dramatically. "Look at you. Bringing nuance to your mother." Ezra grinned. "Cheers to that." We toasted under the lights, the air around us soft with sea spray and summer warmth. And then something shifted. Cormac leaned back in his chair, his gaze on me. "You ever think about starting over?" "Starting over?" He nodded. "Not just a trip, but something bigger. A new city. A new routine." Ezra perked up. "Like moving." I laughed. "You boys want to ship me off somewhere?" Cormac's voice was steady. "No. I just mean you've been rooted so long in that house. Maybe there's more out there for you." Ezra added, or someone. That made me pause. The night seemed to hush around us, listening. "I don't know," I said after a moment. "But I think I'm starting to want to find out." That night, after they'd gone to bed, I stood on the balcony, staring out at the dark water. Below, the lights from the dock shimmered like fireflies trapped in glass. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid of what came next. Maybe the world wasn't as closed off as I thought. Maybe I wasn't. The third morning on the island began with fog. Thick and silver, it rolled over the hills and draped itself across the harbor like a blanket. I woke early, the sheets tangled around me, the air inside the room still and cool. The only sound was the distant creaking of boats shifting in the tide. By the time I made it to the kitchen, both boys were already up. Ezra was stirring oatmeal with far too much enthusiasm for 7 a.m., and Cormac had commandeered the French press like a general at war. "Morning, Ma," Ezra chirped, handing me a mug before I even asked. I raised it in a silent toast. "You two are up early." Cormac offered a faint smirk. "Someone decided we needed to hike to the lighthouse. At sunrise." Ezra shrugged. "It's on all the lists." Cormac shot me a look over the rim of his mug. "Lists? The man lives by travel blogs now." Ezra grinned. "We all need a passion." The hike to the lighthouse was more strenuous than I expected. Roots snagged at my ankles and the path twisted like a question no one knew how to answer. But the trees were ancient and the silence between us was easy, filled only with the sound of our breathing and the call of faraway seabirds. The top, the fog had started to lift, revealing the lighthouse perched on its cliff like a lonely sentinel. We sat on a flat rock nearby, drinking water and catching our breath. I stretched my legs, watching the clouds peel back to reveal a stunning view of the coast. Worth it. Cormac nodded. It's beautiful. Ezra picked at a blade of grass, his brow furrowed. Can I ask something kind of serious? Cormac and I both turned. Ezra glanced at me. When Dad got sick, were you ever angry? I mean, not just scared or sad, but actually angry. Question came out of nowhere, like a pebble breaking the surface of calm water. I considered my words carefully. I was furious. He blinked. Yeah. He didn't tell me how bad it was until it was almost too late, I said. He was trying to protect us, I know that. But it felt like betrayal. Like he'd stolen my chance to prepare. Cormac was quiet, his jaw tense. I looked between them. Why do you ask? Ezra shrugged, but the movement was tight. I guess. I still get mad sometimes. Even now. And then I feel guilty. Like I'm disrespecting his memory or something. You're not, I said gently. Grief isn't a straight line. It's a storm. And storms don't care how long it's been. Cormac finally spoke. I thought I was past it. Until I had to renew his insurance paperwork last month. I just sat there, staring at his signature. And I hated him for dying. There was silence after that, but not the kind that made you want to run from a room. The kind that sits with you like an old friend. Kind that listens. That evening, we returned to the harbor for dinner at a restaurant that overlooked the water. Candlelight flickered on the table. The menu was scrawled in elegant handwriting on recycled paper. We ordered seafood and local wine, and something shifted again, deeper this time, like the moment before a wave breaks. After the plates were cleared, Ezra stood abruptly. Be right back. Nature calls. Cormac watched him go, then turned back to me. Can I say something? I nodded, heart already tightening. You've changed this week. I looked down at my napkin. Good or bad? Good, he said quickly. You see more here? More you. I met his eyes. Maybe I forgot who that was. Cormac leaned in slightly. Then I'm glad we came. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The candle cast shadows on his face, made him look older, wiser, so different from the boy who used to sneak cereal into his bed. Then, quietly, he added, Ezra and I talk a lot. About you. About how we don't want you to keep fading into the background. I swallowed hard. I didn't know I had. He reached across the table, his hand brushing mine. You don't have to be just our mom. You can be Maeve again. I blinked fast, holding back the tide. When Ezra returned, he looked between us, eyes narrowing. What did I miss? I smiled. Just your brother being profound. Ezra slumped dramatically into his chair. That's never good. We laughed, and it felt different this time, clearer, easier. The wine helped. So did the understanding. We walked back to the hotel slowly, the stars winking overhead. As we neared the suite, Ezra held the door open and smirked. So, who's up for the hot tub? Cormac groaned. We just walked 4 miles. Ezra threw his arm around my shoulders. Come on, Mom. You only live once. I laughed, surprised at how light I felt. Let's do it. That night, under the open sky and surrounded by steam, I let myself laugh with abandon. My sons, my anchors, my compass, floated beside me, their joy infectious. I had no idea where life was leading me next. But for the first time in years, I wanted to follow. The morning of our last full day on the island was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. As if the world itself had paused to give us a moment to notice things we hadn't before. The curl of mist clinging to the hills, the faint rustle of gulls sweeping over the water, the taste of sea salt still lingering in the wind. I sat on the edge of the hotel balcony wrapped in a shawl, a cup of tea warming my hands. Inside, the boys were still asleep, their breaths rising and falling in the stillness of the suite. I could hear the soft creak of the floorboards as one of them shifted in bed. A fishing boat cut through the bay far below, its motor a distant hum. I watched it disappear around the bend and felt the ache of departure bloom in my chest. Couldn't sleep? Cormac's voice, soft and sleep-rough, pulled me from my thoughts. I glanced back. He stepped onto the balcony, hair tousled, mug in hand. His presence didn't startle me. It was a comfort, like it had always been. Didn't want to miss this, I said. It's our last morning. He nodded, settling into the chair beside me. It went by fast. Too fast. For a while we sat in companionable silence. Then, with a glance toward the horizon, I said, I think I've been afraid of disappearing. Cormac looked at me. You? Not in the dramatic sense. Just slowly becoming less myself. More of a memory than a person. I didn't even notice it happening until I saw the way you two looked at me this week. He set his mug down and leaned forward, elbows on knees. You never disappeared, Mom. We just stopped asking who you were beyond the woman who kept everything together. I smiled faintly. It's funny, isn't it? How easy it is to forget you exist outside of your role. Later that morning, we packed our bags. Ezra made a production out of it, as usual, tossing socks over Cormac's head and dramatically lamenting the end of vacation. I'm just saying, he whined, I've never been more relaxed and well-fed in my life. Are we sure we're going back? Cormac arched an eyebrow. You have a job to return to. Details. They bantered like that for most of the hour, and I let them. Watching them was like watching a favorite scene from a beloved film, familiar, comforting, and just a little bit bittersweet. When we finally checked out and stood at the edge of the ferry dock, the island behind us looked almost unreal. A place out of time. I felt a weight settle on my shoulders, not of sadness but of significance. Like this had been more than a trip. Like we had rewritten something essential between us. Ezra bumped his shoulder against mine. You okay? I nodded. Just thinking. He squinted at me, a little smile forming. Dangerous. I laughed, then reached for their hands. I needed this. You both gave me something I didn't even know how to ask for. Cormac squeezed my hand. You gave us everything. This was the least we could do. The ferry horn sounded, and the line began to move. I turned one last time to look at the island. It had given me more than rest. It had given me back my name. They bantered like that for most of the hour, and I let them. Watching them was like watching a favorite scene from a beloved film, familiar, comforting, and just a little bit bittersweet. When we finally checked out and stood at the edge of the ferry dock, the island behind us looked almost unreal. A place out of time. I felt a weight settle on my shoulders, not of sadness but of significance. Like this had been more than a trip. Like we had rewritten something essential between us. Ezra bumped his shoulder against mine. You okay? I nodded. Just thinking. He squinted at me, a little smile forming. Dangerous. I laughed, then reached for their hands. I needed this. You both gave me something I didn't even know how to ask for. Cormac squeezed my hand. You gave us everything. This was the least we could do. The ferry horn sounded, and the line began to move. I turned one last time to look at the island. It had given me more than rest. It had given me back my name. Back home, everything looked the same, but I didn't feel the same inside it. I found myself rearranging the living room one afternoon, moving furniture that had stood in the same place for over a decade. I opened the curtains. I played music while I cooked. I started a journal. First entry was simple. Today I remembered how to breathe. Cormac called weekly. Ezra texted daily. Sometimes silly things, memes, song lyrics, photos of clouds. But always a connection. Always a reminder that the distance between us was smaller than I feared. One Sunday, I woke to find a letter on my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a simple piece of paper with 5 words. Next year, same time again? I laughed, folded the paper, and placed it in the journal. Yes. Always yes.